Hey folks, Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round one summary, game 4 of the solo playtest series, and very interesting round one. Round one is a lot of fun. The dice, when rolling for the Vichy and the French territories, seems to be different every game and does play into sort of what happens. And also rolling for the economies. So what happened here, it's always fascinating. It seemed like when I was rolling for the territories, the dice would get hot and roll 4 or 5 in a row for one nation, and then 4 or 5 in a row for the next. So these are the territories in Northern Africa, and see most of them went Vichy, except for Tunisia, and Rio de Oro actually went Vichy. However, the British with their transport came down and liberated it, and these ships were also Vichy, and they've now become Free French because they were at a Vichy port. So that was a huge bonus for the British down here in Africa. Kind of similar, Syria went Vichy. However, over here in the territories that matter to the Germans, they all went Free French. So very successful for the Vichy, including you can see here Corsica, which is a potential landing spot for the British or the Americans later on in the game, unless the Italians liberate it. The Germans had a very successful round one. The only battle that did not go their way was the battle for Normandy. They sent a mech, a artillery, and a fighter to kill this one French infantry there, and the French rolled well. He killed both the mech and the artillery. However, the fighter did score a hit. Now, actually, I haven't done it yet, but the Free French would have scorched these air and naval bases on their turn. And actually, one guy would have actually gone here, and one guy actually would have gone into there. I forgot to do that so that would have happened. So Reims went back to the Free French, and there is only 3 German submarines on the board. Well, how did that happen? Well, it looked very well for the British, for the Germans. With their Bismarck battleship, they had sunk the British fleet here in Sea Zone 23, and they had actually sent 2 bombers in there to do it, and surviving was a British transport, and I think 3 out of the 4 British aircraft that scrambled, and the Germans did not want to risk losing their bombers, so they retreated, and which maybe was a bit of a mistake. However, they had 2 bombers rolling at 4s each, versus the 3 British fighters, which were rolling at 7. So that's why they retreated. So the British transport survived. However, they were very successful in having, I think there was 8 or 9 ships here, and the British attacked with some Free French boats, a Danish boat, and they were successful. They used their entire RAF Air Force, and they rolled a very successful round one. It was like 11 hits. It was crazy. Almost everything hit. So they only lost a submarine, 2 destroyers, and a ferry Swordfish. And the Germans did not roll very well in defense. So now the British have a scramble next turn to this one submarine and potential of the Luftwaffe if they want to attack. The Russians over here got risky. They decided to take a poke at the Finnish destroyer and German naval transport that was sitting there, and they were successful there. They lost their destroyer, and they were also successful in taking Valpuri. And the Russians rolled 13 for their economy, so not too shabby. Now, the Italians have a problem because The Germans actually had rolled for a destroyer and a naval transport here in Sea Zone 37, so they had a German naval transport in the Mediterranean, and so the British fleet in Sea Zone 35 came in and sunk it. And the British also activated Greece. They also had, well, you can see here these three French boats, 2 cruisers and 2 submarines. That was very successful for the British. So the Italians are trying to play defense, so they got their fleet out of harm's way on next turn. So they took care of the British fleet that was in Sea Zone 37, and why not? They may as well. They liberated, or they took control of Gibraltar. So now the British cannot get into the Mediterranean via the Atlantic. So the British also built an air base and a minor IC in Cairo, and the Italians did the same in Tobruk. They also used their air transport to come down here and drop off another guy in Tobruk, and they went into Alexandria. The Germans on the round 1, they were very aggressive. They were able to take Yugoslavia on the second impulse, and they rolled very well, and the Yugoslavs did not. So they have surviving 2 infantry, 2 cavalry, and 2 light armor. So very successful there. Over here in the Pacific Theater, the Japanese did not want to put their forces in a position from the Chinese to be counterattacked on turn 2. So they were very cautious how they moved in, and they decided not to do the Calcutta Crush, or at least not yet. So they built 2 minor ICs, one in Peking and one in Shanghai, and they positioned their forces so the KMT were not able to counterattack. However, the CCP did a walk-in into Shanxi and Chahar, so they will have 5 IPP to spend next turn. However, the Japanese are looking very good on the KMT front. The KMT did centralize their forces in this territory here in Chongqing Hoof, and so they've got about 10 or 12 infantry there with the AAA in defense. So I don't think the Chinese are in risk of losing it to next turn, because the Japanese do not want to risk their air force. However, they could take a poke and take out the bulk of the Chinese forces. Over here in the South Pacific, the naval transport that was in Hong Kong came down and grabbed an infantry off of Singapore and dropped it off in Sumatra. And they did just a 5 infantry build here in Calcutta, and one of the naval transports came in here and took southern Iran. Now, just to clarify, similar to out-of-box G40 territories that are, down the center of line here that are east of India, if Indian or FEC forces capture it, they go to the FEC. However, if the FEC decides to go west of India and capture territories in the Middle East, that money goes to the British. So just to clarify that. Down here, the Australians annexed Dutch New Guinea. So that's a 1 IPP bonus for them. And the Japanese are moving their fleet slowly towards the Caroline Islands. The bulk of their air force is sitting here in Shanghai. They did leave their carriers over here on Tokyo, and the Americans are not worried. They brought their fleet to Hawaii. They built a military base in Hawaii and also a military base. I like this from Captain G. He did this, the military base in the Philippines. So that's a nice little bonus there. The Americans also lend-lease a light armor. It's in Szechuan. The Americans rolled 19 for their economy, so huge bonus for them. So that's the summary of round 1. What are the Germans going to do? I think the Germans, because they have no naval transport left, so how are they going to reinforce Finland? Well, they're going to have to get creative. They're probably going to have to spend some on Navy this turn. maybe take a poke at these British boats here. Not quite sure yet what they're going to do. So we'll have to decide, but however, it should be a very interesting round two. I would imagine the Japanese are going to try and centralize their forces here so that the KMT cannot counterattack them. So it's going to be a very interesting round two, and stay tuned.